The notification came through at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, while Laurel Ashby was reviewing contracts at the kitchen table, with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside her. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a tagged photo on Instagram. Someone she barely knew had tagged her in a comment beneath a post by a woman named Fiona Crest. Laurel didn't recognize the account at first. She clicked it out of reflex, the way you do when your name appears somewhere it shouldn't. The profile was public. 42,000 followers. Lifestyle content. Brunches, sunsets, hotel lobbies shot from flattering angles. The photo that had surfaced in her notifications was posted 3 days earlier. Laurel had missed it until now. It was a mirror selfie, a bedroom. High ceilings, dark wood furniture. A duvet she recognized because she had picked it out herself from a shop on Bloor Street 2 winters ago. The curtains were the ones she'd hemmed by hand because the dry cleaner had shrunk the originals. Standing in front of the mirror, phone raised, was a woman in her late 20s with the specific kind of confidence that comes from knowing you look exactly like what you are. Someone who isn't supposed to be there. The caption read, "Mornings that feel like a secret." Laurel set down her pen. She read the caption again. Then she looked at the duvet, then the curtains, then the slim line of light coming through the window that she knew, without question, was the particular way the sun hit that room at 8 in the morning because she had lived in that house for 11 years. She did not cry. She did not throw her phone. She sat very still for a long time, the kind of stillness that isn't calm. It's the stillness of a person taking an inventory of everything they thought was true. Her husband, Owen Ashby, was in Montreal. A conference, he'd said. 3 nights. He'd sent her a photo from the hotel restaurant on Sunday. Steak, glass of red, a professional smile. She opened their shared location app. The little blue dot that represented Owen was sitting, motionless, at their home address in Oakville. He hadn't been in Montreal since Sunday afternoon. Laurel closed the app. She closed Instagram. She picked up her chamomile tea, found it cold, and went to heat it up in the microwave. She stood in front of the microwave watching the cup rotate and thought, I need to be very careful about what I do next. Owen Ashby was 39 years old and worked in commercial real estate. He was the kind of man who remembered birthdays and forgot anniversaries, who could charm a room of strangers in under 10 minutes, but struggled to sit through a full conversation with his own wife without checking his phone. Laurel had loved him, genuinely, for most of their 12 years together. She had watched the distance grow for the last 2, and had told herself it was stress, workload, the natural compression of long marriages. She had a daughter, 9 years old, named Wren. Wren had Owen's dark hair and Laurel's tendency to read at the dinner table when she thought no one was watching. Laurel was a family lawyer. She knew, professionally, exactly how these things went. She had sat across from women who looked exactly like her, composed, overeducated, quietly devastated, and walked them through the process with the careful detachment her job required. She had never once imagined sitting on their side of the table. That night she did not confront Owen. He came home at midnight. She heard his key in the lock, heard him take off his shoes in the hallway, heard him check on Wren before he came to bed. She lay still. She kept her breathing even. She had already begun to think. The following week, Laurel had lunch with her friend Deborah, a woman she'd known since law school who now ran her own small firm downtown. They met at a Vietnamese place on Queen Street, where they'd been going for 15 years and where the owner, a woman named Mrs. Pham, always brought them extra spring rolls without being asked. Laurel told Deborah everything. She showed her the photo. Deborah looked at it for a long time without saying anything. "The duvet," Deborah said finally. "I know. The curtains. I know. Does he know you've seen it?" "No." Deborah set the phone down. "What are you going to do?" Laurel picked up a spring roll. "I don't know yet, but I want to understand what I'm dealing with before I do anything." She had already hired an investigator. She had already spoken, quietly and hypothetically, to a colleague who specialized in matrimonial asset division. She had already taken photographs of every joint financial document she could access and sent them to a personal email account Owen didn't know existed. She was a family lawyer. She knew how these things went. What Laurel learned over the next 3 weeks was this. Fiona Crest was not a passing mistake. Fiona was 28, worked in marketing for a mid-size firm in Toronto, and had been seeing Owen for approximately 14 months. The investigator confirmed what Laurel had already suspected. The Monday evening squash games, the occasional overnight conference, the Thursday dinners that ran late. 14 months. Wren had been 8 for most of that. Laurel sat with that number for a long time. She wasn't the kind of person who performed her grief loudly. She processed alone, mostly, running along the lakeshore in the early mornings before Wren woke up, going over the arithmetic of the last year and finding, again and again, that she had missed things she shouldn't have missed. She was too good at taking people at their word. It was, she thought, an occupational hazard of spending your days trying to see the best possible interpretation of other people's choices. In the meantime, Fiona Crest continued posting. This was the part Laurel found genuinely bewildering. Not the affair itself. People had affairs. She had seen the full spectrum of human infidelity in her career and had lost most of her illusions about it. What bewildered her was the posting. The regular, breezy, public posting. The flat whites. The gym selfies. The occasional artfully vague caption that was clearly meant for a specific audience of one. And then, 6 weeks after the first photo, another hotel room post. This one was different. It was a weekend. Owen had told Laurel he was visiting his brother in Kingston. This was, in fact, a verifiable lie because Laurel had run into Owen's brother Patrick at the grocery store on Saturday morning, and Patrick had mentioned casually that he hadn't seen Owen in months. The photo Fiona posted on Saturday evening was a room service tray, 2 glasses of wine, a window with a view Laurel recognized immediately as the Westin Harbor Castle, a hotel 10 minutes from their house. The caption. Sometimes the best trips are the ones nobody knows about. And then, because Fiona Crest apparently had no sense of the particular cruelty of specificity, she added a location tag. Westin Harbor Castle, Toronto on. Laurel was standing in her kitchen when she saw it. Wren was upstairs doing homework. Owen had texted her an hour ago. Kingston traffic is brutal, might be late getting back. She put her phone face down on the counter. She thought about what the right move was. Here is what she did not do. She did not call Owen. She did not drive to the hotel. She did not post anything on her own account, which had 340 followers, and mostly contained photos of Wren's school projects and the occasional sunset from the backyard. Instead, she went upstairs, helped Wren finish a project about freshwater ecosystems, made them both hot chocolate, and read to her until she fell asleep. Then she came back downstairs, opened her laptop, and began to think seriously about what she was going to do. The idea came from her work, as most of her best ideas did. She had been handling a case, a client whose ex-husband owned a small chain of restaurants and had been systematically undervaluing the business assets during disclosure. One of the things she'd done for that case was consult with a forensic accountant, who also, as it turned out, ran a small digital marketing operation on the side. His name was Jerome. He'd mentioned offhandedly that the outdoor digital advertising market in Toronto had more open inventory than people realized. A lot of billboard space just sat unused, waiting for a buyer willing to pay short notice rates. Laurel had listened to this and filed it away the way she filed away most things, neatly, with no immediate plan, until the moment a plan became necessary. She called Jerome on a Monday morning from her office with the door closed. Hypothetically, she said, if someone wanted to purchase short-notice digital ad space on a specific outdoor billboard in downtown Toronto, the kind of targeted placement that could appear directly adjacent to existing advertising, how complicated would that be? Jerome was quiet for a moment. How short notice are we talking? 2 weeks, and adjacent to existing advertising, like, you know the specific board you want? I know the building. I know the floor. I have the address. Another pause. Are you asking me what I think you're asking me? I'm asking you about digital ad procurement, Laurel said. That's all. Jerome laughed, a short surprise sound. Okay, let me make some calls. Fiona Crest's company ran a billboard campaign for a lifestyle brand she'd helped launch, an upscale skincare line with a significant outdoor advertising presence in the city. This was, Laurel had learned from a mutual acquaintance who had no idea she was gathering information. Something Fiona considered a professional point of pride. There were 3 large digital displays in the downtown core running the campaign. One of them was on King Street West, a corner board that rotated through 5 advertisers on a standard cycle. Laurel's ad appeared in the slot immediately following Fiona's client's campaign. Same board, same corner, standard 15-second rotation. The creative was simple: white background, clean serif font, black text except for one word which was red. He told me he was in Kingston. He was here. Some secrets are bad at staying secret. And in smaller text at the bottom, in the same font. A wife who noticed. There was no name, no photo, no identifying information of any kind. The board went live on a Thursday morning at 8 a.m. By noon, someone had photographed it and posted it to a Toronto Reddit thread titled, "Spotted on King, is this real?" By 3 p.m., it had been shared 1,400 times. By 5 p.m., Laurel's phone was ringing, not with calls from Owen, who had gone very quiet, but from a journalist at the Toronto Star who had somehow connected the Billboard to the skincare campaign it followed, and was asking if Laurel had any comment. She did not return that call. She also did not return Owen's call, or his second call, or his text that read, "We need to talk," or his follow-up text that read, "Laurel, please." She picked up Ren from school, stopped for bubble tea on the way home, mango for Ren, taro for herself, and listened to her daughter explain, in great detail, a disagreement she'd had at recess involving a skipping rope, and what she considered a fundamental misapplication of the rules. "That does sound like a misapplication," Laurel agreed. "It was completely unfair," Ren said. "I just stood there for a minute because I needed to think before I said anything." "That was smart," Laurel said. "Sometimes you need a minute." The internet, as it turned out, was very good at solving puzzles it had no business solving. The King Street billboard had no names on it. Laurel had been careful about that. Deliberate, precise, the way she was careful and deliberate about everything in her professional life. No photos, no identifying details, no mention of Owen's name or profession or neighborhood. It didn't matter. Within 24 hours, a handful of people who followed both Fiona Crest's personal account and the skincare brand's campaign had noticed the timing. Someone screenshotted Fiona's wedding post from 2 weeks earlier and put it side by side with the billboard. Someone else noticed that the location tag on the post matched the reference in the ad. Someone else, and this was the piece Laurel had genuinely not anticipated, recognized Owen from a photo on the real estate brokerage's public website. Because Owen had once been tagged in a post by a mutual acquaintance of Fiona's and people, given sufficient motivation, are remarkably persistent. By Friday morning, Owen Ashby and Fiona Crest were named in 3 different social media threads, none of which Laurel had anything to do with. Owen showed up at her office at 10 a.m. on Friday. He had not slept. This was visible. Her assistant, a composed and perceptive woman named Gail, called through to tell her. Laurel asked Gail to offer Owen a seat in the reception area and let him know she was finishing a meeting. Then she finished her meeting, a genuine meeting, a custody matter that needed her full attention, and came out 22 minutes later. Owen stood up when he saw her. He was wearing a jacket she'd given him for his last birthday. She noticed that, and then she set the noticing aside. "We should talk," he said. "Yes," she said, "we should. My lawyer will be in touch with yours next week." He stared at her. "Laurel, I've already retained someone," she said. "She's excellent. I'd recommend you find someone equally good. I'm not talking about lawyers. I'm talking about us." Laurel looked at her husband, at the face she had known for 16 years, at the familiar set of his jaw and the particular expression he wore when things were not going the way he'd planned. She had loved him. That was the most honest thing she could say about any of it. She had loved him, and she had missed the signs, and she had figured it out anyway. "Owen," she said, keeping her voice level and quiet, the way she spoke to clients in distress, "we will need to coordinate about Ren. That is the only conversation I'm willing to have right now." He left 20 minutes later, having said very little that was worth saying. Gail brought Laurel a coffee without being asked. "Good morning," she said. "Better than yesterday," Laurel said. The Toronto Star ran a piece about the billboard on Saturday. It was framed, diplomatically, as a cultural curiosity. The revenge billboard, they called it. Though that was not the framing Laurel would have chosen. It quoted several social media users, a marketing professional who commented on the unusual deployment of digital ad space, and a therapist who discussed what the trend of public processing said about modern infidelity. It did not quote Laurel because she had not returned the journalist's call. It also, to her mild irritation, got one detail wrong. The board had not said he cheated here. It had said something more specific than that, and Laurel thought the specificity was rather the point. But corrections were not her priority. Fiona Crest's account went private 48 hours after the billboard appeared. The skincare campaign, according to Jerome's contacts in the industry, quietly adjusted its outdoor placements the following week. What Laurel had not expected, though perhaps she should have, was the volume of messages that came in through her firm's website and her personal email from women she had never met. Some were short, some were very long. They were from different cities, different ages, different circumstances. Most of them said some version of the same thing. I didn't know you could just do that. I didn't know you could just respond. She read every one of them. She didn't have the bandwidth to reply to most, but she read them. Her paralegal, a young woman named Bex who had been with the firm for 2 years, and who Laurel privately considered one of the sharpest people she'd ever worked with, asked her on Monday morning how she was holding up. "I'm all right," Laurel said, and meant it, which surprised her. "The Reddit thread is still going," Bex said. "I know. You're basically a folk hero." "That's an overstatement." "There's fan art," Bex said. Laurel looked at her over her coffee cup. "Of me? Of the billboard. But you know, conceptually." The proceedings moved the way these things move, slowly, with bursts of difficulty at unexpected intervals. Owen retained a lawyer. Laurel's lawyer, a woman named Christine who had been doing matrimonial law in Ontario for 25 years, and had the kind of steady, implacable energy that made opposing counsel recalibrate immediately, handled the early communications with minimal drama. There were hard weeks. There were evenings when Wren cried and Laurel held her and did not say that everything was going to be fine, because Wren was 9 years old and perceptive, and that particular reassurance would have rung false. Instead, she said, "Some things are really sad and we're allowed to feel that. And also, I'm right here." Wren would wipe her face and say okay in the small, provisional way. Children say okay when they're not entirely convinced, but are willing to proceed on trust. The house was going on the market in the spring. They had agreed on a parenting arrangement that gave Wren stability and predictability and as little disruption to her school year as possible. Owen had moved into an apartment in the city, not with Fiona Crest, Laurel's lawyer confirmed, though whether this was by choice or circumstance was not something she spent much time wondering about. Laurel found a place in Oakville that she liked, a narrower house than the one she'd shared with Owen, with a good backyard and a second bedroom for Wren, painted a color Wren had chosen herself. A very particular shade between sage and gray that Wren called morning fog. They had spent an entire afternoon at the paint store going through samples. It was one of the better afternoons Laurel could remember. A journalist from a women's interest publication contacted her in February, asking if she'd be willing to do a longer feature. Not about Owen, not about the affair, but about the billboard specifically. About what had led to it, about what happened after. Laurel thought about it for 3 days. She talked to Christine, who had no professional objection. She talked to Deborah, who said, "You should do it if it's useful to other people. You shouldn't do it if it's useful to other people as a reason to do something you actually want to do for yourself." Laurel considered this. "What's the difference?" "Intention," Deborah said, "which only you can know." She agreed to the interview. She asked to review quotes before publication. She spoke for 2 hours with the journalist, a careful and thoughtful woman who did not ask salacious questions, and was genuinely more interested in the legal and logistical dimensions of what Laurel had done than in the emotional ones. Though she asked about those too. And Laurel answered honestly. The piece ran in March. It was headlined. She didn't get mad. She got a billboard. The subtitle was more nuanced than Laurel would have expected. On the quiet strategy of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and why. She sent it to her mother in Victoria, who called her immediately and said, "You know I've always found Owen difficult. You never said anything." "Of course not," her mother said. "It wasn't my place. He's said it himself now." "He hasn't, actually," Laurel said. "But yes." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay, Laurel? Truly?" Laurel was sitting at her kitchen table in the new house. Morning light coming through windows. She hadn't hemmed any curtains for yet, because she'd bought them in the right size this time. There was a drawing Wren had done stuck to the fridge, the two of them holding hands in front of a house, which was a rendering so stylized as to be almost abstract, but which Wren had labeled with great precision. Me and Mom. There was a cup of tea, not cold yet. The paralegal had sent her a funny message about the Reddit thread, which had apparently experienced a resurgence when the article came out. Yes, she said. And then, because her mother deserved the fuller answer. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But yes. What she thought about, sometimes, in the mornings when she ran along the lake shore, a different stretch now, closer to the new house, with a slight jog past a marina, she was starting to learn the particular character of, was whether she would have done anything differently. The investigator. The document copies, the call to Jerome. The ad copy she'd written herself, 3 drafts, choosing each word with the same attention she gave to a factum. The careful, deliberate absence of names. The timing. She did not think she would have done it differently. This surprised her slightly. She was someone who second-guessed herself on small decisions, for much longer than was probably healthy. She would stand in front of the cereal aisle for a full 2 minutes. But the larger decisions, the ones that mattered, she tended to get right the first time. She thought sometimes about the women who had written to her, about what it meant that so many of them had said, "I didn't know you could just respond." It seemed like something worth paying attention to. This idea that a certain kind of hurt was supposed to be absorbed quietly, swallowed whole, taken without reaction. She had been a family lawyer for 11 years. She had watched women absorb very large things very quietly, for very long periods of time, in the belief that stillness was the same as dignity. It wasn't. Dignity was something you chose. It was in how you responded, not whether you did. It was the absence of names, the clean white background, the serif font, the small line at the bottom that said nothing accusatory and everything necessary. It was finishing the meeting before going to the reception area. It was bubble tea on the way home. It was the morning fog paint, which Wren had declared perfect after looking at it for almost 3 minutes, in the serious, considered way she approached most important decisions. It was, in the end, the decision not to be quiet about something, simply because quiet was what was expected. The lake was steel gray most mornings at this hour, with the particular cold clarity of late winter light that made everything look both bleak and precise. Laurel had always preferred this kind of morning to the prettier ones. It was harder to deceive yourself when the light was this honest. She ran to the end of the marina and turned back toward home, where Wren would be waking up soon and would need breakfast, and would probably ask if they could get a dog, a conversation they had been having in a slow and ongoing way that Laurel was beginning to think was going to resolve itself sooner than she'd originally planned. She ran, and the lake was cold and gray, and entirely itself, and she was tired in the good way that comes from moving your body hard through cold air. And somewhere in the city a billboard she had no further use for was rotating through its cycle on a corner of King Street West, and the morning was already beginning.